Yo, 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 yo. Nikki, yo, whoa, whoa. Okay, y'all. So let's talk about these charges for African Bambaataa that has surfaced. There's some paperwork out there that I printed up. So let's talk about it. I'm not going to go line from line. I'm just going to kind of skim through it, but I will put it up here for y'all to see and stuff. So, um, we just gonna go through the paperwork for now because I like to see how stuff gonna pan out. I got a couple of questions, but yeah, let's just go through it. Okay, so basically, it's the Supreme Court of the state of New York, county of the Bronx. It is John Doe. Who y'all think John Doe is? John Doe versus Lance Taylor, aka Afrika BAMBAATAA, and then they have all his alias and stuff. There's also Universal Zulu Nation and XYZ Corp. I never heard of XYZ Corp. Okay. So basically, it reads that plaintiff. Hopefully, I don't talk too fast. I kind of talk fast, child. So if it's a little too fast, then I think it's the way you can like slow it down. Okay. Okay, so I'm like, okay. So the plaintiff John Doe, by his attorney Tanner and Ortega LLP, complaining of the defendants, respectfully alleges upon information and belief and states as follows. So the nature of the action is this is an action brought pursuant to the New York Child Victims Act, and it has a sanction number there. Open a historic 1 year, one-time window for victims and survivors of the childhood sexual abuse in the state of New York to pursue lapse claims. Okay, so let's go down. It says from 1991, when the plaintiff was merely 12 years old, to 1995, the plaintiff was repeatedly sexually abused and sex trafficked at the hands of the defendant, Lance Taylor. Remember, Taylor is supposed to be Africa BAMBAATAA. All this is allegedly, okay? Because as I went through some of this paperwork, a lot of this stuff is double worded. I know it's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo, but like lines 6, 7, and 8 like repeatedly say the same thing. It kind of had my eyes going cross, but let's just hurry up and go through it, okay? So I'm just gonna kind of skip through stuff and just say the little juicy parts, okay? Okay, so plaintiff, the parties. Plaintiff John Doe is an individual residing in the county of Bronx, state of New York, and upon information and belief, defendant Lance Taylor, known alias as African BAMBAATAA, and then they give all his other aliases. And then the other party, upon information and belief, defendant Lance Taylor resides at 1145 Tuxedo Square and Teaneck, New Jersey, and then it gives the zip code. Upon information and belief, Defendant Zulu Nation is an organization which promotes cultural, musical, hip hop awareness. Upon information and belief, the Defendant Universal Zulu Nation is an organization which promotes cultural, musical. See, I just said that, right? That's line 7 and 8, okay? Let's skip down to line 10. The jurisdiction and the venue. The court has personal jurisdiction over the claims asserted herein pursued, and then it has a sanction number, and that the plaintiff resides in New York. This court has jurisdiction to hear these claims as a result of the passage of the New York State Child's Victim Act passed February. I'm talking about Fetty Daddy. February 2019. As a result of the passage of this act, the statute of limitations for the plaintiff's claim has been altered to allow him to file the instant complaint. This court has jurisdiction over this action because the amount of the damages that the plaintiff seeks exceeds the jurisdictional limits of all lower courts which would otherwise have jurisdiction. This venue for this action is proper in the county of the Bronx, pursuant to sanction blah blah blah, because a substantial part of the events and omissions given rise to the claim occurred in Bronx County. So, let's go to the factual background sexual abuse of the plaintiff, whoever the plaintiff is, John Doe. At all relative times, plaintiff reside at Bronx River Housing, public housing provided by the New York City Housing Authority, blah, blah, blah. And then it says the same thing, that Lance Taylor, aka African BAMBAATAA, at all times was at that same house. And then it also repeats itself and says Zulu Nation was at the same house. And also XYZ was there too. Then it says, upon information and belief at all relevant times, defendant Taylor was a well-known disc jockey, rapper, songwriter, music producer who is universally considered the father of hip-hop music, okay? So, Nation Universal, I can't say that word for shit. They're talking about Universal, Nation Universal, Zulu Nation, XYZ Corp, International Hip Hop Awareness Organization. Let me scroll down because that's just a whole lot of blah, blah, blah. Just keep going. Upon information and belief, the plaintiff met defendant Taylor in 1991. Upon information and belief, the plaintiff was 12 years old when he met defendant Taylor. I'm on line 23. Line 24 reads, upon information and belief, shortly after meeting defendant Taylor, plaintiff became a card-carrying member of defendant Zulu Nation and began attending Zulu Nation's meetings at the BRH Community Center. Now, this is all alleged. You don't forget alleged, okay? Upon information and belief, shortly after meeting defendant Taylor, plaintiff became see, it says it again, okay? So, the same thing, all right? Let me see. Line 27 reads, upon information and belief, the plaintiff became a part of the defendant Taylor's security team. So, he also worked for Afrika BAMBAATAA. So, right now, we know that he been knowing him since he been 12 years old, whoever this John Doe is, and that he was around him from 1991 to 1995, okay? So shortly after line 27, it's about to get a little deeper. So now it says, upon information and belief, shortly after plaintiff met defendant Taylor, plaintiff began to volunteer performing administrative work inside defendant Taylor's apartment, which was known as the Zulu Nation headquarters. Okay? So now, upon information and belief, shortly after plaintiff met defendant Taylor, plaintiff began to volunteer and see how they do? Yes, the same. Performing administrative work inside. Oh, no, this is different. So let me start over because I thought it was a repeat line. Upon information and belief, shortly after plaintiff met defendant Taylor, plaintiff began to volunteer performing administrative work inside defendant Taylor's apartment, which was known as the Universal Studios. I'm talking about Universal Studios. Universal Zulu Nation headquarters. So now he had his apartment. I'm reading over this, and he at. So are they saying it's the same place? Administrative work inside different. That is the same apartment. See. Okay, so let's keep going. I'm reading and stopping. Okay, so line 30. Let's go to line 31. Upon information and belief, defendant Taylor would invite plaintiff to his apartment, known as Zulu Nation's headquarters, several times a week and encourage the plaintiff to exercise in the gym located within the defendant Taylor's apartment. Now, upon information and belief, and all relevant times, defendant Taylor would comment about plaintiff's muscular body and would touch the plaintiff on the shoulders and the biceps and the torso while the plaintiff was exercising in the defendant's gym. It goes on to read line 33. Upon information and belief and at all relevant times, defendant Taylor eventually began to inappropriately touch plaintiff in his private area while plaintiff was in defendant Taylor's apartment. Line 34 reads that upon information and belief at all relevant times, defendant Taylor eventually encouraged plaintiff to watch pornographic videos while in defendant Taylor's apartment and would also encourage plaintiff to masturbating in the presence of defendant Taylor while watching pornographic videos in defendant Taylor's apartment. Eventually, defendant Taylor began masturbating in the presence of plaintiff. So they basically saying that, I want to know, how old is the boy now? So the boy was around him. They'll go to the gym and start off talking shit, like how sexy the little boy was when he was working out, allegedly. And then it moved on to him touching him. And then it moved on to pornographic videos and masturbating together. So that's where they at. Now we're to the point of, per the documents, mutual masturbation. Now it says Taylor progressed to mutual masturbation. Line 36 reads, upon information and belief during plaintiff's visit to the defendant Taylor's apartment, defendant Taylor's sexual abuse of plaintiff progressed to sodomy. Line 37 reads, upon information and belief, plaintiff became a victim of sex trafficking. I didn't know it got this deep. Of sex trafficking, as defendant Taylor would transport plaintiff to other locations and offer plaintiff for sex to other adult men. During said encounters, defendant Taylor would watch as plaintiff was sodomized by other adult men, allegedly. Now, this is some bullshit. This is heartbreaking, really, dear. Upon information and belief, and after the aforementioned events and actions took place between 1991 and 1995. So they saying this all took place in between 1991 and 1995. So back up, they said that he met the little boy when he was 12 in 1991. So 12, 13, 14, 15. Yes, I got my fingers out. I'm counting on my fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 13, 14, 15. So from 12 to 16, it said, okay. So, as a direct result of the defendant Taylor's criminal conduct describes herein, plaintiff suffered physical injury, severe and permanent emotional distress, mental anguish, I can believe it, depression, and embarrassment. Plaintiff was prevented from obtaining the full enjoyment of life and has been unable to keep a steady job. As a result, plaintiff has incurred loss of income and or loss of earning capacity. So that's what's saying that the plaintiff is going through. Upon information and belief, the plaintiff only informed his mother of this of the aforementioned events while in his 30s. So he walked around suppressing this for most of his life until his 30s. So let's move on. I don't want to speak your head off because it's a lot of pages, but I just want to talk about a little key points. So this is the first cause of action, assault against the defendant Taylor. And a lot of this is just repeating itself. Hold on, let me get a little sippy sip. Because they kind of keep telling the story over and over again. So that's pretty much what it's doing. So let's kind of hit some key points here. It said that the plaintiff repeats and reiterates and realleges each and every allegation contained in those paragraphs of the complaints marked and designated I through 40 exclusively with the same force and effect as if hereinafter set forth and less. This is repeatedly stated, so I'm not going to keep saying it, okay? It says, line 42, from 1991 to 1995, the plaintiff was invited to defendant's apartment located in the BRH. We already know, well, I can't even remember what that stands for, but I think y'all know, Bronx River Housing, I think, where he was repeatedly subject to sexual abuse consisting of mutual masturbation and sodomy. During the same time period, plaintiff was transported, oh my Lord, by exchange for money. Defendant Taylor intentionally sexually, and this is all allegedly, honey, this is what I'm reading. Defendant Taylor intentionally sexually assault of plaintiff was for his own sexual gratification and without regards for the plaintiff's well-being. Line 44 reads that defendant Taylor performed the aforementioned actions for his own sexual gratification and without plaintiff's consent. Line 45 reads that defendant Taylor's outrageous and criminal behavior against plaintiff when plaintiff was a minor resulted in the apprehension of harm and unwanted physical contact by the defendant Taylor. It goes on to read that defendant Taylor's sexual abuse of plaintiff violated NYPL sanction, blah, blah, blah. Defendant Taylor sexually assaulted plaintiff while he was a minor. When defendant Taylor was forced, it says when defendant Taylor forced plaintiff to participate in mutual masturbation and sodomy, causing plaintiff to fear for his safety and reasonable apprehension. As a direct and proximate cause of the defendant Taylor sexual assault of the plaintiff sustained severe and serious emotional distress and depression. The amount of damages sought exceeds the jurisdiction of all lower courts, which would otherwise have jurisdiction over this. So let's move on and I'll touch on a little bit. The second cause of action is a civil battery against the defendant Taylor. So again, plaintiff reiterates, and realleges, blah, 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 that clause that I read you before. And then it says the story again. Defendant Taylor repeatedly committed a battery against plaintiff between 1991 and 1995 by intentionally sodomizing, forcing mutual masturbation, and sex trafficking plaintiff to other men who sexually assaulted the plaintiff in the presence of defendant Taylor. Defendant Taylor outrageous behavior evinced the intent to cause harmful and offensive bodily contact to plaintiff and did cause harmful and offensive bodily contact to plaintiff. Line 53 reads that defendant Taylor intentionally and sexual battery of plaintiff was for his own sexual gratification without regard for the plaintiff's well-being and was intended to cause permanent harm to the plaintiff. 54. Line 54. Defendant Taylor performed the aforementioned actions for his own, and it says pretty much the same. Sexual gratification, blah, blah, let me skim. As a result of the foregoing, plaintiff sustained severe and permanent emotional distress, mental anguish, and depression. We covered that. And again, it says the amount of damages sought exceeds this jurisdiction of all lower courts, which would otherwise have jurisdiction over this. Third cause of action, the intentional infliction of emotional distress against the defendant Taylor. So these are all the charges, I guess, that this John Doe is alleging against Afrika BAMBAATAA. So defendant Taylor engaged in extreme criminal and outrageous conduct when he transported the minor plaintiff to the locations where adult men sexually assaulted plaintiff in the presence of defendant Taylor for the sole purpose of offering the plaintiff to perform sexual acts in exchange for monies, honey. All reasonable bounds of decency, thereby indicating defendant's utter disregard for the consequences of his own actions. It reads that defendant Taylor knew that his extreme criminal and outrageous conduct would give multiple adult men the ability to sexually assault the minor plaintiff, which would in turn inflict severe emotional and psychological distress on the plaintiff. Line 61 reads that as a direct and proximate cause of defendant Taylor's extreme criminal and outrageous conduct, plaintiff suffered from severe and permanent emotional and psychological distress, including depression and mental anguish. So that's noted again. It says, by the reason of the foregoing, defendant Taylor is liable for the compensatory and punitive damages. Fourth charge is the cause of action for negligent infliction of emotional distress against defendant Taylor. So defendant Taylor breached his duty to exercise reasonable care when he extorted the minor plaintiff to the apartments belonging to adult men for the sole purpose of offering the plaintiff to perform sexual acts in exchange for money. It also reads that it is foreseeable that sex trafficking an individual, especially a minor, will result in the infliction of severe emotional and psychological distress. Thus, the defendant Taylor knew or should have known that his negligent conduct would result in the infliction of severe and emotional and psychological distress. It goes on to read, as a direct and proximate cause of the defendant Taylor negligent conduct, plaintiff suffered again, psychological, mental, and depression. And they're seeking punitive damages. Fifth charge, gross negligence against defendant Taylor. Defendant Taylor evinced extreme indifference to plaintiff health, safety, and rights by breaching his duty to exercise reasonable care when he transported the minor plaintiff to the apartments belonging to adult men for the sole purpose of offering the plaintiff to perform sexual acts in exchange for money. Thus, the defendant Taylor knew or should have known that his willful and malicious conduct would cause foreseeable harm to the plaintiff as a minor child. And as the direct and proximate cause of the defendant's gross negligent conduct, plaintiff suffered from severe and permanent emotional and psychological distress, including depression and mental anguish. By reason of the foregoing, defendant Taylor is liable for compensatory and punitive damages. Now, the sixth cause of action is negligence against defendant Zulu Nation and Universal Zulu Nation and XYZ Corp. So it's pretty much the same thing. I'll read a little bit. It's basically saying that they watched it go down and they should have known, pretty much. Is what they're alleging. It's saying defendant Zulu Nation, Universal, Zulu Nation, XYZ Corp. Had a duty to take reasonable steps to protect plaintiff, who was a minor child at the time, from the foreseeable harm when he was in their care, custody, and control. It reads that during that time that defendant Taylor was working for the server as a founder of defendant Zulu Nation, Universal Zulu Nation, XYZ Corp. And it said that they had a duty to take reasonable steps to prevent defendant Taylor from using the tax, the premises, and the instrumentalities of the position with the Zulu Nation and Universal Zulu Nation and XYZ Corp. To target and groom and sexually abuse children, including the plaintiff. At all relevant times, the Zulu Nation, Universal Zulu Nation, and XYZ Corp. Had a duty to prevent the sexual abuse of plaintiff at the hands of the defendant Taylor, is what they're allegedly. It states that Zulu Nation and Universal Zulu Nation, XYZ Corp. Breached the foregoing duties by failing to use reasonable care to protect plaintiff from sexual abuse, which allowed and enabled a defendant Taylor to groom and sexually abuse the plaintiff. Line 77 reads, as a direct and proximate result of the act and omissions of each defendant, plaintiff suffered and will continue to suffer, again, physical, emotional, and otherwise. Let me see if there's anything else here. Line 80 says, in addition to defendant Zulu Nation, Universal Zulu Nation, and XYZ Corp. Is directly liable based on its own reckless, extreme, and outrageous conduct by providing defendant Taylor with access to children, including plaintiff, despite knowing that he would likely use their position to groom and to sexually abuse them, including plaintiff. Their misconduct was so shocking and outrageous that it exceeds the reasonable bound of decency as measured by what the average member of the community would tolerate, and demonstrates an utter disregards by them of the consequences that will follow. Honey, that's what line 80 read. Let me see. So basically, they saying that they knew, and that's a damn shame that they knew. Is basically what they saying. I'll read a little bit of line 81, and then we're gonna wrap this up because it's almost done. Defendant, blah, 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 Zulu Nation, Universal Zulu Nation, XYZ Corp. Engaged in reckless, extreme, and outrageous conduct by representing to plaintiff and his family that defendant Taylor was safe and trustworthy. Oh, honey. So they saying that they told the little boy family that he would be safe where he at. Okay. Despite the fact that defendant Zulu, allegedly, honey, I don't know. Despite the fact that defendant Zulu Nation, Universal Zulu Nation, and XYZ Corp knew or should have known that defendant Taylor was using his position as Zulu Nation to groom and to sexually abuse children, including the minor plaintiff. Their misconduct was so shocking and outrageous that it exceeds the reasonable bounds of decency. That's the same thing. And measured by what the average member of the community would tolerate and demonstrate in utter disregard. Yeah, that's the same thing. Yeah. Let me see if I see anything else. A lot of sanctions. The conduct of defendant Zulu Nation was intentional and outrageous as it pertains to the oversight, knowledge, and or acquaintance of sexual abuse of plaintiff and other children by defendant Taylor, and while within the scope of his employment with defendant Zulu Nation and Universal Zulu Nation and XYZ Corp. Okay, let me see. So the ending result here says, wherefore the plaintiff John Doe demands judgment against all defendants in an amount exceeding the jurisdictional limits of all lower courts of the state of New York on the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh cause of actions for A. Compensatory damages in an amount to be determined by a jury. B. Punitive damage in an amount to be determined by a jury. And C. The cost and interest and attorney fees. So John Doe want them to pay for his attorney fees and everything. So that is the end on that. Sorry if that was long. Tell me what you think about it, but that's what's going on. I had to read through it because I wanted to say what was going on. So that's what's happening right now. I want to wait for it to finish panning out. Like, comment, share. Let me know what you think about what's going on. And do you think that John Doe is Hassan Campbell? I don't think it is because the little boy was 12 at the time in 1991. So I don't know. Tell me what you think. All right. Love.